Okay, it looks like sound is good. I've got my little bits and pieces attached. I had to buy a lapel mic and a broadcasting unit, not only for this, but I mean, I got so many people bitching at me for poor sound, and they don't understand exactly what I've got going on here and why that's continually changing. And it relates to these experiments I was doing with magnets, which are all the time causing problems in my electronics and other gear here for software as well as the sound recording. And I was using sound and am still using sound within the magnet experiments, which have been quite interesting. And I figured out one way to destroy one of these 3/8 inch ceramic neodymium magnets, which is quite hard actually. It's very difficult. They're very seriously magnetized by electric shock after they're created by a slurry method, mixing this stuff up, making a ceramic out of it and heating it up. Maybe that's it, yeah. And so I was doing, I've been doing a bunch of these experiments. One of the ways to test magnetic sensitivity is with sound gear, because I was looking for various different kinds of reaction from the experiments I was doing. And just the other day, I got a great walk in the head as a result of doing one of these with 9 magnets. This is 4. And I was trying something relative to even odd numbers and have discovered a great deal about the magnetic fields, even odd numbers of magnetic loci, of magnetic source points within the magnets. It makes a difference. Strange as that might sound, makes a significant difference whether you're attempting to do, damn it, to do these compression experiments with 4 or 5 or 8 or 9. I mean, the odd numbered aspect of it is a significant factor in the gaining of magnetic force in here as you manipulate the fields. And it's very difficult to do even these 4. And then doing 5 was a challenge. And I did some thinking and wrote some equations and worked it out that 9 would be, at this size, would be about the maximum I could obtain any effective leverage over, given my physical mass. Without using, ratcheted come-alongs and stuff, right? I've got to just put these down while I'm talking. Okay, so anyway, though, so I did do it with 9. I constructed a 1/4 inch plywood box with some little slats. I've got some of it on my truck. I don't know if we can see it out there. Yeah, there's some of it remaining on my truck. It was covered with 1/4 inch plywood. I had ropes. I've got these lever things that attempt to maneuver the little spheres into a position where I can use this other rope and pull this piece of material across the last one. See, there's still even bits and pieces of the exploded one on it. Anyway, pull the last one across it and maneuver the force field over to lock it in place. There's no real reason that I can lock it with 4. I can lock it with 5, although it was very difficult because I was trying to do it with my hands alone, and my old gnarly fingers are just not up to the demands of that. It was probably requiring, in some cases, 30 and 40 pounds of force on one of these magnets, one of these small little magnets, to roll it over into a position where it actually caused the field to lock. And then by the time I get up to 9 magnets, because I've got 9 loci, there's a nasty exponential curve in the magnification power of the collapsing fields for each additional loci involved, each additional locus involved. And so the loci, the totality of them, magnify the amount of force required. And I was straining, okay? So, and I can pull a 70-pound bow, recurve, a stick bow, and hold it, aim, and then release. So I've got significant strength in my shoulders and upper body, and was barely able to get that ninth one into place. And the upshot of it was something triggered the release, very much like we just saw here, only it was on a stable steel platform base. The wood structure was held clamped in place. There were levers and strings and as I say, sticks and stuff. And I was using, I won't go into the details, but anyway, that ninth one rolled into place. I grabbed the rope, which is my climbing rope here, so that's a 3/4 inch multi-dimensional line, multiple wraps and so on, like it'll hold my weight or several multiples of it off the side of a cliff. And I'm pulling on it, pulling on it, pulling on it, and I get it to roll over, and there goes the ninth one into place, and then I release it, and kaboom! The whole thing, it held there for a millisecond, it held. But at that time I was attempting to do it, there was a very large, heavily loaded logging truck running out in front of my place, less than 100 feet away. We get vibrations in this building from that. That's why I had the floor built up the way it is, with multiple layers of dampening, and even that wasn't enough. And it exploded. It didn't just fly apart. It wasn't like previous destruction of these little structures where the fields, as they unwind, fling the things apart from each other. Sometimes they'll collapse into these long strings, right? And basically nothing happens. And they're all one long string. The majority of time you release these, that's what occurs. But sometimes, because of how it's twisted at that moment, there's a repulsive force aspect to the field, and they have a tendency to fly apart. Or usually what happens is that three will shift one of them outside of the constraining structure. This time I had 9, and the one in the middle apparently couldn't move, so it self-destructed. It blew itself to shit. Dust, magnet bits everywhere, little chunks through the plywood, a little chunk into my forehead. So next time, full face masks. Next time, recorders, video recorders on the experiment, which means everything gets that much more complicated, which is a royal pain in the ass. And also, I've got very little room in here. This building is, I think, effectively inside, it's barely 19 feet wide. And so you can't really, and I got shit everywhere, so it's really packed, especially given the situation of the virus and the impact it's made on getting material and all of this kind of stuff, right? So anyway, all right, magnets aside, let's get on with the quick little business about risk assessment. Because it's all coming to a point here in this second half of the year. We're in the second half in a serious way now. And actually, I think the eclipse of today, of July 5th, really moves us along in a pretty good clip into this. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a number of areas here to look at for risks. What we're trying to do is to plot a potential for maximum risk. So we would have here a max. You see that? Yeah. Max risk items, and then we want to have and within the max risk, let's do it the other way. Hang on. Let's do it this way. Makes more sense. You better stay up, you bastard. Okay, so here we have max risk, and here we have minimum risk. Now, neither of these, so this is just maximum risk of something that's going to occur. Doesn't mean that it's good, bad, or indifferent. Okay, so the outcome of the occurrence of the event is not part of this particular assay. Of all the negative things that could happen, we want to know which may have potential for maximum occurrence or which have a minimum potential for occurrence. Of all of the good things that happen, we want to know the number that are going to be, possible in terms of that have the maximum potential to manifest or minimum. And so it's kind of like, in the bad part, it's kind of like, what do I need to worry about? All right? So in other words, of all of the shit out there, what's likely to affect my particular situation? And so it depends, and so we have to decide what our situation is. We find out those things that within our situation that we can identify as pegs that we can use to help localize the idea of maximum potential to occur or minimum potential to occur. And then we have a risk, so we have a risk of these things manifesting. If they're good, well, we like that risk, if it's going to be a good thing that you're going to, if you have a feeling really lucky and you've had everything, big lucky streak running and you got a lotto ticket and it just feels like it's going to win, well, and it could be bullshit, it just could be a hormonal thing going through you, but nonetheless, assuming that it was accurate over time and you were able to assess this and you would feel that you would have a maximum risk of a good thing happening to you. It's still a risk of manifestation. That's all I'm talking about. We could say potential as well, maximum potential. So the maximum potential or the minimum potential for these things to occur. And so we can look at various different things, right? And what we want to do is we want to plan for those things that have a high maximum potential to occur and a risk of being personally bad for us, okay? So a risk element is of a negative for us. And so you can run down through these lists real quick. It's fairly easy to see. And we can see where they all relate to each other. And unfortunately, there's a whole slew of things that are occurring that are all interrelated that are raising the maximum potential of negative impact should they occur. So each item that could potentially occur has a variable amount of impact on us, and it has a variable amount of positive and negative within that impact based on external forces for that individual event. So we'll go through them. You can see what we're talking about here. So Three Gorges Dam has a maximum potential for negative impact, mostly on people in China, but because of the cascading idea of failure within our globalist system, any seriously negative impact on China is going to have a negative impact on the rest of the world. Whether we happen to dislike China or not is not the issue. It's the interrelatedness of everything. And so Three Gorges Dam has a real serious potential for failure this year. And not only this year, within its maximum potential for failure is within July and August. This is because of the rain patterns and the flooding and so on, okay? So its maximum potential for manifestation is over these next 2 months, and it's coinciding with its maximum potential for negative impact, okay? Because in the dam, the maximum potential for manifestation of a failure is when it is hugely flooded, and of course when it's hugely flooded, the negative impacts of that are very much greater than if it was not largely filled. And so we start looking at the cascades of problems that occur if this dam fails just for China, and then we can extrapolate it onto the rest of the world, and we can see what is the likelihood that it will fail. Well, the likelihood is actually fairly high. We can get rid of that right away. On Weibo now, there's some serious discussions by Chinese scientists and engineers, especially their serious head cement engineers and concrete structure engineers are saying basically, this dam is not going to make it. And at some point it will fail. It wasn't well done. There's lots of corruption in the cement business. We didn't get good quality. Plus the design is bad because it's just giant. It's not connected to the bedrock. It's just basically a big giant obstruction of cement that's not even really fused together. And so there's all kinds of design flaws in it. Plus, all of the rivers downstream are already seriously flooded. If so they can't release any more water, so that has to build up behind it, and behind it for hundreds and hundreds of miles. The rain and so forth, it hasn't been this heavy in over 100 years. In fact, they've already exceeded 100-year flood levels, so the whole valley system is flooded throughout the Three Gorges. south or downstream as well as upstream from it. So it's going to get worse. We know that. It's also the rain is due to get worse in July and August because that's the period of time that it rains up there. So these have been exceptionally early heavy rains, and it's getting worse. And there's now landslides. The landslides were what the Chinese dam engineers feared the most, okay? Because their thinking at the time they built the Three Gorges was that if they had sufficient landslides upstream during a heavy flood, enough material may come on down to block the ability of the lower release valves to function within the dam structure, and then the dam wouldn't be able to release water at all. And it is so bad at this point that on Weibo, the rumors are that people that work there at the dam are walking around on eggshells, afraid for their lives, afraid for the lives of their country, basically. Because if it goes, it'll take out all of these cities downstream, which include Shanghai, the world's largest city in numbers concentrated into a small area, 42 million people. And that'll be 24 hours after the dam breaks. Something like 4 hours after the dam breaks, two major towns of over 1 million people will have been washed out. They'll go within the first 30 minutes, it'll start affecting them. They'll get a 60-foot high wall of water that'll just wash it all away, taking out buildings. All of this debris and all of that kind of stuff will impact the next town to be hit, and ultimately, three hours later, I think, maybe 4 hours, it's going to hit Wuhan. And then it'll take through Wuhan and keep going. And 24 hours later, it'll reach the coast. And that's when the badness starts, okay? Shanghai gets hit, but then also we have environmental damage and nuclear contamination at that point because there's all these downstream nuke plants. Those that are not washed away on their own right into the South China Sea will have lost their ability to have cooling water. And they'll go into meltdowns, just like Fukushima, only inland in China along the river. Not good. Years ago, I think it was like maybe in 1978 or something, there was a dam that collapsed in China and 350,000 people or something like that died. There was like 100,000 people that died initially and just from being drowned. And then there was, in a short period of time, like weeks and days, over 250,000 died from hypothermia, starvation, and exposure to the elements and damage to their bodies that wasn't initially fatal. And so, but nobody could come and reach them or rescue them because it's just not possible under those circumstances at that level of disaster. We're going to have 100 million people. They're going to be affected directly in the flow of the water from the Three Gorges, what used to be the Three Gorges Dam, to the ocean. It's going to have environmental damage all along the way. That environmental damage will start with the dam ripping loose from the slight mooring things it has on the side of the hills. And so it'll take down that whole hill structure, and this all will move down stream in this whole horrific mess. And so this section of China will be severely devastated. Then there's the international devastation, because right across from China, right across the way from this is with the prevailing winds and everything is Korea. And so Korea is going to get tsunamis, they're going to get environmental degradation, they're going to get nuclear contamination, and other kinds of pollution all around their country just because of the outflow from China on this. There's going to be the loss of the major manufacturing belt in China, both because of the dam, okay, tearing loose, and then the loss of electricity. Three Gorges Dam is a big chunk of the Chinese modernization and the electricity within China, and it's going to go. If the Three Gorges Dam goes, along with the horrific weather, there's also volcanoes that are now becoming active in China. Magma's moved up underneath them. The land's shifting, so that's contributing. So our weather stuff here, our weather issues, our planetary issues are contributing to the Three Gorges Dam problem. This is part of this risk thing where all of these various things contribute to this potential here having a maximum risk and a maximum negative for us, all humans, but also for here in the USA, as we'll get to in a second, occurring. And so China Pop will lose electricity. That's going to affect manufacturing across the whole nation. It'll affect food supplies. It'll affect everything in China. The amount of electricity that's lost if the Three Gorges Dam goes. Because bear in mind, they'll lose all those nuke plants as well. So it's not just the electricity that the dam produces, it's all the nuke plants downstream. It's going to cause massive amounts of disease, cholera, epidemics at that level within China as a result of poor sanitation, the release of all different kinds of, contaminations, etc. There will be 400 million in China, 400 million, bigger than the United States, 400 million population that will be directly affected, just sort of radiating out from the Three Gorges Dam cascade collapse, right? And this is likely to take down what's left of the Chinese Communist Party, which is going to lead to the breakup of China into 7 independent states and vast quantities of chaos within that for 30, 40 years, who knows. But basically, for all of the rest of us guys, we have a maximum amount of negative for us coming from manufacturing in China, going from the disease and from the number of people that are affected. And then we're going to have the economic aspect of this increase, the potential here for each of these as we go further along. So basically what's starting to happen in terms of our risk assessment is that we're starting to get this piling on effect, okay? The planet is changing, the climate is changing, these are going to affect the Three Gorges Dam. The planet is changing, the climate is changing, and it's going to affect the Three Gorges Dam, which is going to affect the CCP, which is going to affect the USA, because we're at war with the CCP. They're actually invading our country now. They're promoting and part of the culture war. They want to expand here and take us over. So we're going to go to war with them. We're at war with them right now. This is all being affected by the planet, the climate. The Three Gorges Dam going is going to affect that in a huge way. And our infrastructure here is at max risk of degradation ourselves, both electricity. So you can expect your electricity bill to go up around 40% this year. Okay, that's in the next 6 months. That's before the end of this year. Your electricity bill is likely to go up 40% for all different kinds of reasons. There's some level of possibility that because of the infrastructure in terms of the economic, the lockdown having caused commercial real estate to go in and be flushed, that may free up some electricity that may thus end up in some locales actually lowering electrical bills, but it won't be ubiquitous across the country. It'll only be in some areas where they've got too much electricity because too many office buildings are shut off, right? But not necessarily in your area. If you're not living around these office buildings or where they can shunt the electricity, you're not going to benefit from it. But there are going to be those kind of minimum risk aspects in some locales for some of these various different kinds of problems. But in general, the planet's going to affect everybody, the climate's going to affect everybody. We are seeing snow in Canada, we're seeing all different kinds of heat and cold related occurrences that are having both maximum negative impact and maximum potential to lead to our ice age. Should have written it in blue. To lead to our ice age, and that's going to have huge impacts on all of this and all of the rest of us, because probably over the next 20 years the USA and the CCP war will continue unless these people collapse fairly quickly under the weight of everything that's going on in China. But quickly might be 5 years, might be 10 years, right, instead of 50. We just don't know. There's going to be a Cold War because we're all going to be fighting, dealing with Ice Age stuff. That's showing up now. So we now have temporal markers that basically indicate that the Ice Age is here. And so we don't have to worry about its potential for occurrence because it's manifesting at this moment. And the ice age, as part of the climate change, will continue on. We'll be looking at this in 2061 as being on the waning side, okay? So the period from 2041 to 2061 is going to be like the middle of the hump, and then, so we're going into, well, it'd be like this. We'll just do it in this way, because we're talking about negative temperatures, negative degrees Fahrenheit, right? Okay, so the hump will be this area here, and then we'll be getting slightly out of it as we go out of 2061. That's the projection now, but that's a projection. We don't know for sure. We won't know until we're into 2041. Then we'll be able to assay what that last decade has been like, and if the trends are indeed pointing this way. Remember, the trend is our friend. Nonetheless, we have to assume we're going to be dealing with cold going forward. We're going to have to be dealing with a continued culture war going forward because the CCP is paying for it, has prompted it, has directed it with their Confucius centers. They've taken advantage of people that have no other option. And bear in mind, for these people right here, there is no plan B. So these revolutionaries have no plan B, okay? They will persist until they die or wear out, and simply because they have no other alternative. They've just been set up that way. I've read the Antifa manual. I've got a copy of it here. I've got a copy of this other book on the Antifa, their history of their last 100 years struggle against fascism. And really, Antifa is a fascist organization. They're bullies. They're really fuckers. And their understanding of history is warped, seriously warped. You talk about cherry picking. These guys make David Wilcock look like an amateur. And spinning the narrative. Again, they make the woo-woo guys. They make the space alien UFO suckers, you know, I want to suck on a Pleiadian girl's tit kind of guys look like amateurs. Anyway, Marx, all that shit, they're all hypocrites. Can't do anything and don't know how to express themselves in a world that doesn't value their particular mental illness. Okay, so our risk assessment, though, and I'll get done here real quick, is pointing at, I'm just waiting through July and August monitoring the climate. In the last of August, if the dam hasn't collapsed and the weather starts to wane down, we'll still have maybe the month of September as all that water filters out of the northwest of China and starts working its way through this central river valley system towards the Three Gorges. If the Three Gorges can withstand the existing flood and what will yet come over these 2 months, then hey, we'll squeak by and not have to deal with this whole cascade of problems, right? Not that China still won't have problems. So if we do our risk assessment and say, look, okay, Three Gorges Dam did not fail this year. Hooray, hooray for China. Hooray for all of these people that didn't die. Hooray, hooray. All right, still, China's fucked. Because China's got big economic issues. China's at war with most of the planet now. They know it, the rest of the planet, a lot of them don't. They don't understand they're at war. The economic and other pressures, including the disease, the COVID shit, is going to really impact the CCP, and it'll really impact the USA because of our circuitous little battle here, right? CCP is funding so much in the United States, owns so many companies and stuff here, is battling our political structure, is trying to rip apart the social fabric of the country, and at the same time continue to make investments in shit here and prop up everything so they can buy it as they go along. And it's just not going to work. It's breaking down as it is. So our commercial real estate's collapsing. That's going to impact the Chinese investment. They own a lot of office buildings. So it's all circuitous, right? The the COVID is killing more of them than it is of us. The approach to dealing with the disease over there versus over here is different. The Chinese CCP does not really care about the China pop at all. And they refuse, for whatever reason, China is like seriously censoring factual information to their own populace about what will help them prevent getting ill and getting severe cases of the bioweapon that they released. So they don't tell their population to supplement, even now. Now, of course, our government doesn't, but at least they're not really restricting that information going out. There's a lot of us that are saying supplementation works. And we know factually that nobody with vitamin D greater than 40 nanograms per milliliter is reporting to the hospital with any symptoms of COVID, of the disease, SARS-CoV-2. And so we at least have some level of reality emerging within our USA. And personally, I like the idea that we're in culture war, that our infrastructure is going through shit at the same time the planet's getting the crap kicked out of it, or changes are manifesting, however you want to think about it, because this allows us here a chance to overturn the rot that has been foisted on us in our academia and the fake science, the fake authority, and the stupid fucking politicians and stupid fucking media. In fact, our big problem here is media. And so that is manifesting now, and as part of the culture war, media is going to get the shit kicked out of it in terms of the existing claim to authority. We're going to lose the New York Times, we're going to lose the Washington Post as any claim to authority at all. I don't even know if they'll still exist 2 or 3 years from now as any kind of an active publication. The changes over the next couple of years are going to be quite significant, and the net result will be life entirely different than what we used to know even back 7 months ago, right? Or even now. It'll be entirely different than what we know now. Actually, the majority of the new energies that we're going to be affecting us will be incoming from July onward. This has to do with what's known as the return current sheet. So let me explain. I'm going to take all of this down here for risks, okay? So I've been studying light. I've been studying light from Boscovich's De Lumini, translating that slowly. It's very precise Latin, very accurate description of light and its creation and how it works. And some of the issues I've been dealing with, and some of the reasons I've been dealing with it, is because we are creatures of light. It's positively able to be established that much of the activity of our bodies as biomolecular organisms are triggered by light. And in fact, that what we take as signaling molecules within our system are in fact triggered into that activity by exposure to certain kinds of light. I won't go into any of the, boring you with the details, but biophotonics is a very cool level of study. One of the reasons I'm studying it is because our sun has changed. So I grew up under a yellow sun, and I don't feel the same under this white sun that we have now. And I notice the people around me that are born under this white sun are not as I am. They don't seem to have much of the, there's a difference between us. It's not palpable, but it is discoverable if I really look for it. There are differences. So I think humanity is in the process of changing relative to the light that's coming into us, and this is part of these strange energies from space, because there's other than light in terms of energies that are affecting our biophysiology and our mental expression of same, okay? And so the reason that we're about to get more of this, more weather, more changes, more light, UV, etc., has to do with this electrical thing called the return current sheet. And I'm going to explain it. This drawing is not going to be to scale, so understand that. But you got your Earth. You got Mars, Venus, Mercury, okay? And we're going to assume that these planets are separated by space and all of that. We're going to assume that they're being drugged behind the big scary ball in the sky we call the sun, and that the sun is heading this way. The sun is ionized gas. That's what causes all of the corona and all of the energy. Electrical, the light, everything comes from this ionized gas layer that is existent because the sun is a highly magnetized hematite and tungsten and heavy metals, heavy ferric kinds of metals in those classes thing moving through a friction through a charged particle matrix that we call the interstellar medium, okay? And it causes this the tip of the thing to glow because it's being pushed through. There's a sort of friction, if you want to think about it that way, and it lights up because of the electricity. This electricity creates the heliosphere and the heliopause, which are these fields, big electrical fields that surround the entire solar system. We have other planets out here that get, Saturn, Jupiter, all the way out, big guys, right? Anyway, so the electrical flow of all of this is that this charged particle layer all around us is antipodal and in two layers. It's like a thermos. It's like two vacuum bottles, one inside the other, one with one charge, one with the other charge, and they swap back and forth, and there's dynamics and so on, but we won't go into that. But what is really important at this stage is that there's this electrical flow that comes out of the sun back towards us. It is predictable, and during the months of July and August, usually it used to be August and a little bit of September. Now it's a little bit of July and August, and so it's appearing to move through the year, a sign relative to the fluctuation of the sun itself. So here we are on Earth, and what we have in the month of July and August, this is the end of July. Let's just pick the last third, so the last 1/3 of July. We have this stuff called the return current sheet, okay? And what that actually is that throughout most of the year, except for these two periods, there's two return current sheets. So they're basically around a little after the solstice. And what happens is that we have a charge coming off of the sun that comes back, and this is a negative charge, and so a negative electrical charge that comes back, and it energizes all of the planets, okay? Now, sorry about that. Okay, so as this electrical thing comes back here, it ionizes our atmosphere, creates the Schumann, or participates in the Schumann resonance in terms of altering the atmosphere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, throughout most of the year. But this is a grounded system. It is a complete system. It's not open. And so there is a return sheet that goes back to the sun during the months of July and August. As I said, it used to be August into September. Now it is mostly August, a little bit of July. And these are all headed back to the sun that way. This is coincident with hurricanes, typhoons, always has been. And this is coincident with changes in atmospherics within the poles very rapidly, always has been. Changes within the numeric balance of charged particles within each of the poles and within both poles all participate in going in this return current sheet back to the sun. And so we actually have a negative, we have an electron flow, an electricity flow that goes back to the sun through this period of time in this return current sheet effect. During that period of time is when we get all of the weather in terms of the extraordinary hurricanes, the amount of vast quantities of air movement. All of it is electrically driven. by the charges in the atmosphere. Since the charges in the atmosphere are highly variable now, this is when we get the chaotic aspects of that, and it's due to this return current sheet process. This happens on all planets, by the way, but not all of them do it at the same time of the year. Mercury and Venus will do it earlier, Mars will do it later than us, just because of our locality relative to the sun. In fact, Mercury, I think, does a return current sheet 3 times a year. And can have their whole charge blown away by what's going on the sun, but not now, because the sun is going into its quiescent period, which leads us to our ice age. This will also affect us in our ice age, okay? Because now note what's happening here and why it was so important that I kept bringing up the sunshine, or the snow in July. And that's because because snow now in July and August will start to become more prevalent with the expansion of this return current sheet, which is part of this whole process. So it'll get bigger this July and August than in previous years. Plus, as we go forward in time, this will move back through the year. So pretty soon the return current sheet is going to be in June and July. And then we'll have heavy, heavy, heavy snows in July, as though it were winter, even in the northern hemisphere. And then as it moves further back, it'll move into spring and eventually go back and go through this whole cycle. And by the time we come out of this in 2041, if we're doing it, and it starts wading back, then it'll go back the other way, it'll start shrinking, and the sun will presumably change yet again. But so during this next period of 21 years at least, if not 41 years, then we're going to be looking at an expansion of this and strange weather that will move from within northern hemisphere summers back towards spring relative to this return current sheet. So you'll start seeing typhoons and hurricanes and tornadoes way earlier in the year, and they'll fade off in their traditional season. This will also affect disease states, because all life is going to respond to the electrical processes that are involved here. And so this is known to occur within the sun. Anytime the sun goes quiescent, we have massive amounts of new diseases that erupt on the planet. Plague years, all of that kind of thing. And hey, we're right back at it. So there we go. This is our driving force. This is why I was very concerned about this particular time, July to August. This is because of the size of the return sheet. We may get absolutely horrific rains that will be devastating to China. And if we get them, the Three Gorges Dam is fucked. And all of that cascading failure stuff will occur. If we don't get them, it's like they've got a year to prepare, because we'll get them next year. And we'll see what happens then. Anyway, though, so risk assessment over. Let you know what I think is coming. It's not just my assessment. I've been talking with some guys that are actual billionaires. Kid you not. Well, one guy's 900 million. He's got like 960 million or something. So he's almost a billionaire. And they've got a different view of the economic issues. And they were interested in picking my brain. I picked theirs on some things, and I'll go into some of those economic things here in another talk in the future. And then also real quick, okay, so masks of all kind. The reason, okay, so I don't mind wearing the mask. I think it's kind of cool. You know, it keeps the dust out when I'm or sand out when I'm on the beach, keeps the dust out. I've used masks of one form or another for 40 years in building trades. You know, building my own boats. When I used to be a professional boat builder, when I worked as a carpenter, I'd always have masks. I didn't like breathing the dust. So it's never been a problem for me to have them. Now, the reason that they work on COVID, even when the weave, okay, so you've got the weave of the cloth, and you have this hole, and the virus with its little spikes is small enough to go through the hole. And you think, well, that mask is no good. No, it doesn't work that way. The reason that this does not occur as much as you might think is that the virus itself is going to be encapsulated in a water droplet. The water is going to have a negative net charge until it's expelled into the air, and then it's going to try and ground itself down. It will try and ground itself to the negative positive net charge that's on the fabric. Even though the fabric will have, you know, negative charge as well, you know, friction, etc., it will still have a net positive charge, and so that will draw the little water droplets that's around the virus to the fabric itself. And since the virus can't survive, can't propagate without you, and it needs water to get on you, if it dries out, it's doomed. Okay, so the masks work. And in order to sterilize them, you take the mask, whatever its nature, whatever kind of fucking cloth you've got, and you put it in the sunlight. And then 3.5 hours later, you turn it over and let the other side get it. You don't have to worry about viruses on that at this point. This virus is weak to UV. It's also weak to vitamins. You can harden yourself up and not have to worry about it. Then you've got the political issues of mask or no mask. Some states, they really throw a fit. Others, no one gives a damn. So it just depends. I happen to like them because we're getting into a dusty environment anyway. I'll probably end up wearing neck gaiters or something like this for the rest of my life, just as our atmospherics are going to get wonky, especially this July and August relative to this return current sheet and the weird shit we're going to see. Sorry, guys. Anyway, I have to go and repair cars and stuff and get things working around here. Bear in mind the strange energies from space will affect your sleep. This is why I've come up with this. This is actually why I put it on the market. I came up with it for my own body. I needn't have bothered anybody with it, but it's some people had asked me about it. I'd passed it around to about 30 or 40 people, and they kept wanting more and more and more. And they were lazy asses and didn't want to make it themselves and measure it out themselves. So I partnered with the guys over at Pure Sleep or Pure Bulk, and we came up with this. You can go to purebulk.com. You can go to halfpasthuman.com, and there's a link to it. You can get it. This is a 60-day supply of the stuff. You feel good. I have this every night. It doesn't leave you hungover. It will aid if you had a little bit of a hangover from drinking the night before. If you had a lot of drinking, it's not going to help you. Okay, that hangover is your reward, your cure, so to speak, for drinking too much. But it does aid the mind, and it certainly aids the body in getting you to sleep easily, cooperating with the body while it's asleep to make you feel good when you wake up the next morning, because everything's functioning a little bit better. And I'm working on some variants for it now that add even more oomph if you've got various different kinds of conditions, and we'll maybe bring those out in a while. Sorry it took so long. I was really out here to do a mic check and then get some batteries charged and that kind of stuff. So, all right, so that's it for today. And I'll go into this economic stuff in the future. It's going to be really an interesting year. We won't be bored. Bye, guys.